Welcome back to the show, folks, kids, parents, adults, babies. Oh my God. Today we have the most beautiful trifecta in the world happening. If you're watching the YouTube, you see my dying appearance. I'm just like shake mode. So we got the sisters in the house. We got Tull. She's been on the show a few times. Y'all know her. And we're gonna welcome in the wonderful Paulina. She is here. We've tried a few times to get her on, but now we're here together. And I just want to say welcome.
Thank you for having us. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you so much. I don't know if Zoom caught it.
The little squirrely movements, the shimmy shimmy. All right, so today we are going to dive into all things revolving sisterhood, revolving our own personal stories. And if you are someone out there, especially a woman who is, you are in this place of you're in this dichotomy with yourself. One side of you wants to trust intuition, wants to follow the signs, wants to believe in this invisible world that so many people repress and do not say yes to, when it's so clear when you trust it and believe in it and see it with your own keen eye, or if you're in this very logical masculine era. And the conversation will just continue from there. So I want to open up this conversation with asking whoever wants to go first about the personal journey and what was the first moment, just because I'm not able to articulate this prior to the entire flow will come out through the question, through the answer. But what was the moment in your life, if it was a moment, or what was the event that brought you from this maybe less aware way of life to a much more aware way of life?
I'll go. So I have always had some sort of spiritual connection, you can call it, since I was young. When I was a teenager, I felt it pretty strongly. And I sort of started disconnecting from it when I wanted to be a part of a group, when I wanted to be a part of high school, middle school, wherever it was that I was, at the time. So I, disconnected from the dreams, the visions, the things that I would see and I was really connected with. And as you two know, but those listening might not, I started partying pretty hard. So I started getting really, really disconnected from it because I was smoking, I was drinking, I was doing drugs, I was doing all these things that really, really disconnected me from this. And I started sort of finding my way back, I would say 5 years ago, maybe something like that. And I would still have like one foot in and one foot out at all times. I would be like doing my yoga and my meditations and my practice, and then going and like getting trashed on the weekends. So it was like this, exactly the word that you use, this dichotomy. I think the proper slap in the face that I got, that was like, you need to stop what you've been doing and completely devote yourself to this, was when I was arrested.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was definitely the moment. We talked about it on the last podcast. Like, I was crying for 3 days straight in a cell. Even thinking about it is so foreign to me. Like, what, me? At the time I was vegan too, and like being vegan in a jail cell, the people that were I don't even know what they're called, like the guards, were looking at me like, what are you doing here? Like, what is this person doing here? And I was like, I don't know. And that was the moment, after crying for 3 days straight, that I told myself to get back on track and get back to my gratitude practice at this shitty moment, or else you're going to be stuck in this loop forever.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, it hasn't been a straight road, definitely not, but it is. I think that was the proper slap in the face that I needed, because I was good before then. I had a whole period of time where I was like, I'm not talking to my party friends. I'm not going to associate with them. I stopped smoking, I stopped drinking, I'm meditating every morning, I'm getting up at 6 a.m. Like I was on top of it. And then all of a sudden I was like, I haven't gone out in a while. And I just like spiraled for another loop of a couple months. And then yeah, that was the proper slap that I needed, I think. I mean, it's still something that unfolds all the time. I don't think that was what brought me back on track, but I don't think it was my awakening, because I was even looking through my journal earlier today, and my journal from then earlier today, and I was literally writing in like complete fogs of not knowing, like my handwriting is all over the place. I'm like, at least I'm being consistent. I don't know why I have to go through this phase, but I guess I need to. Like, I know the universe is putting me here because I was there, but I was also not. It was it's very weird to see, because they do, I guess, go hand in hand. A lot of people I know that I even read a sentence that I wrote that was like, is this what a dark night of the soul is? Am I just getting, is this what it is? Like before I got arrested, and I'm just like drunk every night. Put it lightly, not drunk, a lot of other substances, but I was just like writing, is this what it is? Is the universe showing me? Am I getting to know my shadow side? Is this it? Like I was there, but I was still heavily in the loop. So it was, yeah. I don't know if there's this like specific moment that was like, oh, I found God. Like that's not, I don't think I had that. I had definitely had, get back on track, sis. Like you gotta do the work now.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I can really relate to the partying phase, and something I was just really recently reflecting on is I made a little video anointing myself with my blood a couple days ago and just shared about it online. And what I really wanted to write as the caption with that post was about the time that I did that in my ex partnership. And I remember him being so mortified when he saw me playing with my period blood. And that was towards the end of this 5-year super toxic trauma bond relationship that was just underhanded resentments and unresolved traumas that we were just like throwing a hot potato back and forth to each other for years on this very vicious cycle. So there I'm relating with you, Dad, about just the presence of a cycle, a toxic cycle, being the origin point of that quote unquote awakening or realization phase. And his deep embarrassment and shame of witnessing who I was becoming as my voice was getting louder and my expression was getting more wild, and the radius in which I was traveling on my own to go to festivals. I went to festivals by myself because he didn't want to come, because we were just so different, and I was just growing into a spectrum that made him so fucking uncomfortable. So as that was happening, the blood started to be present. And as I was reflecting, I realized he was so obsessed with pleasing his parents to overcompensate for his lack of relationship to his creative expression and his devotion to his creativity and his ability to pursue his creative passions. So he was just kind of at the feet of his parents, and his parents were also, they had accidentally or somehow seen my Instagram, and I posted a picture of blood on my face for the first time. And his parents were mortified. I mean, his mom, who was like my soon eventually to be mother-in-law, was just completely just lost her shit. And so he kind of rode that wave with them and trailed behind them on that sense of shock and disbelief and like, what are we going to do with this girl? How is this going to work? And that was a really reorienting moment where I realized, what's everyone so afraid of? And like, why is there so much shame, so much discomfort? And I felt very powerful. I felt my ego be like, oh, so that means I'm doing something so powerful that these people are so upset. Why are they so? And I liked it. And as that evolved, like I ended up moving away, we separated. It was very kind of pathetic and sweet and funny the way that happened. It was pathetic, like on my end in my process, because he said, "You're ready to fly. And like, I don't want to hold you back," because he knew I didn't have the courage to walk away on my own. And it was true. All of it was true. I'm ready to fly. I feel held back, but also that I couldn't do that myself. But the truth that I think maybe he wanted to say was like, we're so ashamed of like whatever the fuck you're doing and whatever the fuck you're going to continue to do. And that's just like not going to work in this relationship. And my family is very, you know, conservative, kind of country folk that live out in the middle of nowhere with cattle, and it's just really not, it's just not understandable. So anyways, I flew the nest and fell right into another relationship immediately that was actually waiting for me as part of our toxic resentment cycle that I mentioned. So I fell into the arms of a beautiful man that was so different in his reaction to my blood. And I remember witnessing his curious smile when I was like naked in the rain and the thunderstorms of the summer in Georgia, offering my blood back to the earth and praying with it and putting it all over myself. And a moment of awakening for me was in seeing the different response regarding my blood and just the overall response of being witnessed. And a word he would always tell me or call me was interesting. He always called me interesting. And I would get so irritated. Like, am I like a thing that you find interesting? Like, I was irritated by that, but simultaneously it triggered that same sense of power that I felt with the blood in the first place of like, oh, because something here is triggering something. In the first scenario, it was very upsetting. And in the second scenario, it's very interesting. Mm-hmm. And I started to notice this cycle, and it all was revolving around the period blood. And so as I really sat with, you know, the like, the inner like humor, like tickling people's buttons, I, over those past 5-6 years, like just really, really dove deeper into my relationship with my blood. And so that is one avenue in which my connection to myself was growing through the blood and realizing the way I relate with intimate people, partners, friends, and loved ones with the blood as a central concept or central theme that I was allowing to be witnessed in those relationships really shifted the way I was able to see myself. Because to see myself be feared for it, and then to see myself be kind of like pedestaled as this like interesting specimen that was like doing these very fascinating, strange things, it was very intriguing. So then I started to see myself as that too, and be like, it is cool, like this is amazing. And so the encouragement and the shift in the way I was being perceived allowed me to finally lower my walls that I had just within myself and honor myself, and then come to a really humble and respectful place with the blood. Because with my body here, with the blood, with the super rebellious, eccentric messages, you know, if you scroll back 5 years ago, I was just really fucking triggered. Everything I was saying was coming from a place of being really triggered. And it awakened other people that were also triggered because they could resonate, you know, and they could understand. And that's maybe where that traction was growing on my page years ago. But I was deeply traumatized and hurt, fragmented and triggered. And you can see it. Don't go back and look, but you can see it. And so the blood was a really powerful access point for me in my relationship with myself, in accepting and welcoming a new stage of evolution, and how that change starts with ourselves. And once we love ourselves, we can learn how to relate with others. And once we respect and, you know, really, really see ourselves, it's like I found all of that. Not that I've found all that and I've reached that point, but in those years, I was finding that with my blood.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. I think it's fascinating that you had the courage to become involved with your blood, because until I'd met you, I'd never heard of such a thing. I was like, whoa, that's kind of cool. It was never a question of why is she doing that? It was like, how can I do that? Or like, it was very much like this is a thing. Like, so I'd love to hear, like, what was your first, like, what led you to that? Or how did you yeah, come alive to that.
I'm really grateful that you asked that, because how I mentioned, I posted the little video anointing myself recently, and it brought me to this spiral and this deep existential quandary. And I couldn't remember when I bought the period cup, where I bought the period cup, how I learned about a period cup. And when I posted that picture of blood on my face, however many years ago that was, I had never seen anyone do that before. I had never heard of playing with your period blood. I obviously had learned about a period cup as an alternative to tampons, which I instinctually felt a calling towards. I don't currently recommend them. So, I mean, I think they're a very, very helpful tool in transitioning from toxic tampons, that no matter what kind, you're still putting something in your body that's going to absorb and hold that blood there. The point of the blood is for it to release from the body. It's not meant to be held inside. That's why it's dripping from your uterus. It's supposed to fall out of your body and be released. That doesn't mean that recycling it in like ceremonious ways is irrelevant, because this is another very, very separate conversation for another day. But the tampon thing, it's holding it somewhere where it's meant to be falling from. So the period cup does the same thing. It's still collecting it and holding it, but it's a little different because you're actually able to collect it in a different way. So you pull the cup out and that blood is warm and deep and red and raw and pure. Whereas the tampon, you know, unless you squeeze it out in a bowl of water, you're not able to actually access the blood. So that's the thing I like the cup for. But anyways, I don't know how I found all that. I had never heard of that. I'd never seen a picture of a girl with blood on her face or doing anything with blood. But I remember the moment I took the picture of myself and I recognized myself, and I was actually afraid of myself. Like I looked at that, I took a selfie in front of the window with the nice lighting, and I like just covered my face in blood. It wasn't any design. It was just like covered it in blood. I had makeup underneath because I was wearing makeup in those days a lot. Eyeliner, mascara, you know, the bronzer, even though I was in Florida, and had a perfect tan that didn't need any extra help. But that's where I was at that time, and whatever, it was fun. That's great. There's nothing wrong with bronzer. And I remember seeing the picture and seeing something in that picture that ignited something in me that was like those moments where you look really deeply in the mirror and then you kind of have to blink and be like, who is that? And then you hear the echo of your voice, and then you look deep, and then it's so scary. And you're like, how much acid did I just accidentally have? Or like, what just happened? And that was a moment when I looked at myself with the blood, and I didn't really, it just happened. I can't tell you how or why or what led me there. It just happened. I was playing with the cup, and that's what happened. And it never stopped, and it kept growing. And I had not seen it online for a very long time from that point. Like I didn't start to see it be a thing until a very long time, till years afterwards. And of course, when something comes into your awareness, then you start to see it everywhere. But I was not seeing that until years later. And it was just an awakening. It was like in a way, like within my body, of the blood. Because as we look at the blood as an elixir or a substance that is coded with information and memories, by connecting with it outside of the body, that's what makes menstrual blood so fascinating and special, because men don't have a regular, you know, blood that comes out of their body. And we regularly have a cyclical bleed that is externalized and is shed from the body. And so it's a totally different composition. And if we recognize the fact that it scientifically and literally is filled with nutrients and minerals, and that it holds the encoding and the DNA and the genetic structure of our grandmothers, it really speaks differently to understand that. So I think from my really immature college girl that was still ripping tequila shots and seeking external validation with the most handsome stranger I could find at the bar that I would make a bet on that I'd be sleeping with, that was all simultaneously still happening. Like as Thal was just saying with her party years, very, very consistent there in our cycle obsession that we had, unconscious obsession to disassociate with. But yet, I was like doing an experiment on myself. I was just experimenting. I was just learning. And in those really hypersexualized experiments, I also felt this tantric awakening that feels related to the blood, because the blood awakened this like the mystery and the deep wisdom and the deep cosmic information that's stored in the blood of our heritage, of our ancestry, of our cosmic origins, and really the genetic intelligence of being human, and ancient memories of the earth and the ancestors that walked on the earth, that is in the blood, that you can access when you work with the blood. I was doing an experiment in that without realizing, but this kind of like sexual exploration was also an experiment for me, where another part of me was awakening. This like tantric priestess, you know, this part of ourselves that has training and initiation in these sexual realms. Before, it was completely demonized and desecrated, you know, when the goddess and the feminine and sex and intimacy was desecrated down to a very shameful and slutty thing. So there was an interweaving there for me in those two cycles with the blood and the, which is all related to just like learning the human body.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What comes up initially for me is, why do we as a culture like make so very easy to understand blood comes out of the body? It's meant to do this. This happens regularly, routinely, cyclically. And then the culture place that into this culture, into this known crazy culture, because y'all have been in the Americas. At least that's where I feel it the most. And it gets dampened with this masculine energy. Oh, you have this time of the month where we're not going to witness it. We're just going to kind of ignore it. Here's this tool you can use to plug it up, get back to work. We're on this slave mentality. We want to just grind the gears until there's no lubrication, and then things start going really bad. And so I really feel like for you to come to this awareness and this fucking curiosity at the most playful level of like, hey, this is my blood. This is mine. This belongs to me. And it, you know, like, I'm just gonna see what it's about. And to just let yourself do that, and to let yourself play with it, to let yourself be seen. And another part that I really admire about you is your tenacity to make people think again. Like, let's think twice. And it's kind of like I'm like doing this motion with my hands. I like think of the cavemen rock and getting the spark. Like the first time they started to do that, I'm like, that's how you make me feel. I know a lot of other people, like, I can't speak for them, but I know you feel this too. And so I'd really love to hear any words from you as well, Tal, about like your connection with your own journey with the blood. I love where we're going, and relating it to sexual power. And so maybe the experience of that, like, maybe this came into your vision, your world, and then the power came with it. Or how did you explore that sexual power? I know that's a very raw topic that many people are very scared to talk about.
It must mean that we should do it.
Yes.
The sexual exploration was its own thing that I had such a lack of awareness around my bleed. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually remembering a memory that I've never spoken out loud, which was in high school, before, when I was still in my virgin phase, which is a phase that I feel very proud of, like moving from child to maiden is that rite of passage into having our first bleed. And then when that maidenhood becomes, the patriarchal word would be exploited, probably by penetration. Mm-hmm. But in the ancient wisdom that we all know and is encoded in our bodies, we remember the time when that was a rite of passage and an initiation into a state of maturity, where we were hopefully evolved and mature and discerning enough to know how to work with our sacred sexuality. And so we would do that, you know, in empowering ways. And so I remember a little playful moment in high school with like fingers, and I remember blood coming out, and this guy was just so, again, mortified, just as the previous partner I was just talking about with the face painting. He was mortified. I had no idea my period was coming. I was a teenager and I was still a virgin. I had a period for years by that point. I got it when I was 12. I had a period for many years, enough years to know what it feels like when it's coming, and I didn't know it was coming. And it didn't really feel good. I didn't really know what he was doing or why he was doing that with his fingers. And it was the first time that had ever happened, you know, with the finger thing. And the blood coming out was really like, I was equally as shocked because I wasn't expecting it. But I remember feeling embarrassed that it was like, why didn't you tell me that that was going to happen? And I remember him saying, this always happens to me. So he had experience with that. And it made me feel like, why didn't I tell you? Like, well, I didn't know. And that made me feel so embarrassed. And so I'm not sure if that is at all on the same thread as the question that you asked. Maybe you can ask it again, but that was just what came forth for me as we're kind of going down the wormhole of this interrelatedness of sexual exploration and blood.
The question was about basically like becoming aware of your blood, and then like how your sexual power arose or arose in itself. But I think that's an even more potent story to have shared, because how many people out there have had an experience in their young years, probably not talked about with a parent, given the where we may have been, whatever religion you were, whatever the beliefs were in the family. I mean, I sure as heck was never told. And then you start to have those experiences with the opposite sex, and you're like, all right, okay, I don't know if this is cool. I don't know if does this happen? Do I like it? I don't know if I like it, but I'm not going to say no because no one's taught me to say no. But then the reaction where we're kind of hit in the gut and we're like, wait, what? And it stops us. But because we're so young and because we don't have anyone to share it with, it's like it gets locked in, stored, and then it's a piece of us that is ready to kind of come unlodged through these conversations. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I'm just like memory lane, different stories where I'm like the embarrassment creeps and you're like, I don't know what to do about this. This is just my body.
Or being with partners previously and having to apologize for being on your bleed, having to say, I'm so sorry, I'm on my period now. Like, that is, why did we do that? Why did we do that? And it goes back to what you said earlier, that we've come into a place as a society where I think there's a lot of people like us, especially us who are sitting here talking, and whoever's listening, a lot of people that are awakening to their blood. I spoke with a couple of girls more than a couple of girls from my high school that were not really in contact, but they see the type of things that I post, or they listened to our podcast or something like that. And they're like, oh yeah, I water my plants with my blood. And I'm like, oh, there is this growth and this advancement. Like, it is happening. But as a general statement, yeah, it starts from the way it's portrayed in society. That's where it comes from. You're bleeding, you're dirty. And it's not something I've heard it until today, still having a foot in the corporate world. I still hear that. It's not something that is gone. I definitely have opened people's minds up to a different way of thinking about it. That's not to say changed at all, but just showing that there is a different way of thinking about it. But even like tampon commercials that show you that you need to keep working and running and doing, and you can do everything.
Yes.
And for going from there, and on my first period when I was 13 or 14, I used a tampon from the first second I started bleeding. It wasn't even like a transition into that. And going from that through all these years to get to a point where a couple weeks ago I was free bleeding in the ocean for the first time in my life. Like, that is such a powerful place to be. I didn't have nothing. I was just letting it be. And that's it's a process. It's not something that happens overnight, and it's something that I can totally resonate with what you said, Paulina. I don't know when's the first moment I started playing with my blood. It was I think it was before I had a menstrual cup though. It was when I was using pads, I think at some point. I was just like, I would look at it and be interested by it.
Mm-hmm.
And with the menstrual cup, that was what elevated it as well. Although I'm with you, I don't use them unless it's like I need it for ceremony or some sort of ritual. I don't use those because I just don't like putting anything inside me while my blood is trying to flow out. But it's a process. Oh, and connecting it with sexuality. I think the more I connect with my blood, the more I connect with my sexuality, if that makes sense at all. And going from a place where when I was younger, the people that I would be with would be disgusted by it and I would be embarrassed that I'm bleeding, to the last person that I was with being really excited by the fact that I'm bleeding and really honoring the fact that I'm bleeding. And even though it didn't work out, like that showed me that that exists and that's not something that needs to be feared. And yeah, and also connecting with my blood has led me to a point of practicing celibacy because I realize that I don't want to share it with anyone else other than whoever is going to be the person that's for me. So it's a process going from that sexual experimentation and not connecting and not knowing ourselves and going through a wild phase, to put it lightly, to getting to a place where I'm like, no, I'm actually gonna not do it with anyone until I find that person. It's a wild process.
I love that you've found that, like, and decided that for yourself, because the blood, the way I understand it, when there's not the filter of any layers between your blood and a penis, and there's not a condom or something to keep them from the penis really being able to absorb the blood and to read it, that's what it's able to do as like an antenna, or as an exploration device into the inner sanctum of the holy of holies that is our body. So being penetrated while we're bleeding is allowing that person to read our blood and read the information within our blood, which contains all of our power and all of our cosmic codes, all of our ancestral wisdom, all of our traumas, everything. So it's like allowing them access to share and partake in the vast potential of our absolute power, all of it, and the secrets and the misery and the glorious potential that empowers us as our womb and blood, like, is the source center. Yeah, allowing that to be accessed through intimacy during menstruation is like a huge gift to give. And look at our world, the general consensus is that that's like, yeah, okay, call me when you're done. I'll be, call me when you're done with all that. Then we can get back to having fun. So it's like, if only we could really, if only we are, it is as if we are dissolving that and reorienting that inversion that has obviously been placed to disempower and disconnect union and couples from being able to access the full potential of what's in the blood. And then when you get the sperm mixed in and you're doing some stuff there, there's a huge, vast, multi-dimensional portal that's opened. So of course, we get put on birth control to dysregulate our bleed. We get the running commercials of the girl with the sports tampon to tell us to go, my doll does it all, go back to work. So that we're not even given the opportunity to even talk about the bleed, let alone sharing the bleed, let alone a man to be empowered enough in his connection to his seed to know how to recirculate it, to know when to release it, to know when to hold it, to know when to hold it just a little bit longer and then release it, to know where to put it when he releases it, to know how to use it when he releases it, to know how to recycle it, for women to know how to recycle their blood or what to do. It's like, let alone to even get to those points where any of those conversations can be had, let alone the moment where the seed and the blood get put together into an elixir. Again, in that category of another conversation for another day, but imagine if we could get to that point. And like, what does that stir to even hear that? What does that even mean? Where does that take us in our mind to imagine?
Magic.
Straight up magic. And what question popped into my head was, what what has been stripped away from men who, like, in the sense of them being in this sacred masculine, right? We're hearing all about it. Y'all, if you're a woman, you got toxic masculine, don't be hating on the men quite yet. But yeah, different topic. But like, what has been stripped away from the ability of men to even witness us in our power during the bleed, and for that union to come together, penis, blood, like what wisdom are they being stripped of because they think it's a bad, dirty event to indulge in, enjoying that process? Like what could be given or gifted from the blood to the penis seeping into their body if they allowed it, if they had this understanding of, oh, this is something that is beyond worlds going to accelerate me in XYZ way. Not sure where I'm going with that, but if you have any feedback, that would be wonderful.
I do. There are many ancient cultures where the woman is bleeding and she is up on a pedestal. She is worshipped as the goddess that she is and given the time to rest, and also honored as that vessel that the veil is thinned when she's on her period, when she's bleeding. So it's there are many like indigenous ancient cultures, very, very few of them I think still exist today. At least not in the Western world. There are still some that I heard may exist in Africa, but I haven't heard of any of the native cultures today, although they probably keep it under wraps in the Western world. So that are held up on a pedestal. So the men, the women, the children, everyone in the community recognizes this woman who's bleeding as holy, pretty much. And that's what they've been stripped of, that knowledge of the woman who is bleeding being at that position and at that place, and getting into a place of not being able to express their emotions, not being in touch with who they are, not being allowed to cry, these things that are feel so outdated when I'm even saying them. But it still exists. And so it's all these things that are coming together that are really just holding the men back from being able to explore that. I think before exploring that next level of sex magic, of blood and semen mixing, it's more of having to get to know themselves on a broader scale. Of course, there's men that are already doing the work and already there and already understanding, but on a broader scale, it's the getting to know themselves and doing the work of themselves and being able to be in touch with their own feminine side as well. So it's not just that fully masculine side, which is really, really important. It's not something that we want to completely disregard, but it's just being in touch with the whole, like, full spectrum of who they are and being able to express that. I think that's step 1, or maybe like step 5. I don't know exactly.
And something I feel in the process of like the divine feminine is reclaiming her blood, reclaiming her power, reclaiming her equal rights, reclaiming her place in the world. Oh my God. And we get into this radical feminism and we have to fight so aggressively to reclaim our throne. And what that actually is toxic masculinity. When we feel like we have to fight for our place, that is actually abiding precisely to the rule book that the patriarchy has manipulated us into believing as our Bible and as our guidebook, to fight and to be aggressive and to not just sit with our blood on our face on our throne and just command our reality, not to fight and beg people to respect us. And so the inversion that this awakening of the divine feminine is, I'd like to go back before the patriarchy and see, why did the world become a patriarchy? Because if we look at the processional equinoxes of the infinite cycles throughout the eons of the great floods, and then the earth arose from the volcanic, gurgling of the inner sanctum of the earth and becoming an island that's separated into a continent of Pangaea and Atlantis. It's like, okay, let's go back for a second. So the patriarchy, okay, great, that's fine. We all see it, we know what that is, and okay. So we're rebelling against this thing, but we're actually doing it with like training that the patriarchy gave us. So we're like just walking into a wall repeatedly and calling it feminism and calling it, a forward movement, which is Okay, so I think the question is, why did the Earth become a planet of patriarchal infiltration? And in order for the swinging of a pendulum to happen, for this radical extremism to come into being, that must mean there was an imbalance and something happened, where something fell out of balance, and then that's when extremism took place. So it's a swinging of the pendulum that happened. So the world was a matriarchy. All cultures know the times and remember the times when the world was matriarchal, when the circle of women was the central circle, was the high council. In every culture, there is that time. This is also the time when the moon was being worshipped. Many ancient cultures we see, in ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, Turkey, Cyprus, everywhere, goddesses with their frame drums worshiping the moon. Another conversation. So I think so far we have 3 more episodes to come.
Yeah.
Based on another conversation for another day. The world was a matriarchy. Planet Earth knew matriarchy. Something happened and that changed. And the world of planet Earth is now patriarchal. So in that shift, whose memory we have in our blood and in our body, in our bones, in our vagina, in our penises, in our DNA, in our cellular memory, there is a remembrance of something that happened. So when we're in this rage and we're in this fighting like animals for my rights, respect me, it's time for me to be respected, it actually awakens the time when the goddess actually fell into extreme disbalance, lack of balance, disharmony, and irregulated truth that was out of alignment. So as we imagine this like great, powerful feminine force, from my understanding, there was an infiltration. Something happened and this feminine force became manipulated and she became too powerful for her own being. And when I talked about the blood on my face and I looked in the mirror and I was like, wow, this is triggering. I remembered that in my body, where it was like, I could misuse this and it could be so, so hurtful and it could be devastating, but I could do that because I have this blood and this blood is powerful and it would be really easy to misuse. And a part of me remembers a time when it was misused, and that's where the goddess came out of her throne and the patriarchy had to claim that empty seat on the throne because the world was out of balance. So we are not victims to the patriarchy and the tampon commercials and the Midol and all this stuff that we're like, oh my God, it's so fucked. The world is so scary. It's so true. It's so true. And that is so valid. And we are in a sacred war on consciousness. We've been at war for eons. Planet Earth has been fought over for eons. Planet Earth has always been a very desirable place for other dimensional beings to access. And Earth has been seeded from different dimensions and planes of existence for eons to be this multi-dimensional, very rainbowy place, seeded with so much diversity and intelligence from other origins, and to be a melting pot. So I just want to really encourage in the reclamation of the blood, reclamation of feminine power, does it really need to be a fight? Or can we kind of go back and take responsibility for what happened? Why did the goddess have to come off the throne? And why did the patriarchy have to take reign? And now we're actually seeing the end of the patriarchy naturally, because what we're seeing is great devastation, great manipulation, and a great imbalance. So just as the goddess fell from her high authority and her high benevolence and her high purity and perfection that did exist at the peak of her reign, she soon fell, the patriarchy rose. The patriarchy is now falling, and what's going to happen next? That's the important question. So we want to like fuck the patriarchy, then let's stop acting like patriarchal puppets when we're fighting like crazy feminists. This is not something we need to be viciously fighting using their tactics. We need to be remembering the tactics of love and unconditional anchoring in our being And with this whole movement of people being able to identify as a woman and being able to identify as having a bleed or having a womb, we don't need to be threatened by that, because it is an absolute utter lie. It is not true. So this whole threat that the genderless agenda is bringing into the world through the patriarchy, it is not threatening to women who know their bleed and who know their body and who know the cycle of birth and death and their fertility and the entire spectrum of what their body can do. So in the reclamation of blood, I think also comes the reclamation of responsibility and what happened in our ancestry and in our genetic lines and in the genetic line of the earth. Even if we feel like aliens that don't belong to this planet, we still have genetic coding that holds these memories, and those memories are keys. And responsibility needs to be taken for the imbalance that brought us to where we are now, and that we're not victims of the patriarchy. And as long as we keep acting like that, we're going to be under the power of the patriarchy, as long as we keep acting with the guidelines that they gave us of how to act and be. So by connecting with our blood, that's a sacred rebellion. By connecting in sacred devoted union, working with the blood, maybe working with the seed, whatever. You don't have to drink it. You don't have to do all, step by step, by even opening ourselves to the potential of eye gazing while we're making love and looking beyond the body and looking into the deeper sanctum of our multidimensionality. That is a sacred rebellion. These aren't things you're going to buy a masterclass on and totally overcome. This isn't something a life coach can teach you in a 4-week program. These are ancient truths that are stored within our blood, and this goes way beyond anything that anyone could ever tell us. So if the power goes out on the whole planet, what source of energy do we have? What about that ebook that we bought? Are we going to still be able to learn from it when the power goes out and there's nothing but our blood and the dirt and the mud and the rivers and the water? Do we have drinking water? Do we know how to grow food? Do we know how to live? And do we know our body? Do we trust ourselves?
Welcome,
Myself now.
welcome to our world. This is the realest conversation I've ever had on the podcast, and these are the conversations that are changing our perceptions, our minds, how we go about living a life, because how long can we live a life that is so contained to little boxes that we have to cut ourselves into pieces to fit into, and then to not feel as a whole person? And yes, everyone, I do feel very called that we will have little segments to go into like different aspects, like sex magic. People hear that and they're probably like, oh, what is this? And it's like, calm down, take a seat, it'll come to you soon. And so I think this is very, like, these are the conversations, like, this is the first step, in my opinion. Like, women who have found themselves in a place where they are confident in how they connect with the earth. Starting there, it's simple. We make things so complicated. I like how you bring it in, like that the ebook isn't always going to be there. If all of these things that's been created in this world that as humans we've made to make life easy, so to say, but we've gotten caught up in the convenience of, if something bad were to happen, if we were to lose it all, could you survive for longer than a month? Would you know where to, like, what berries to eat? Would you know how to move with the weather if you're in a mountainous area? Can you research the people that had lived here in the plants and dive into all of those little aspects? I think that's a very important message in this entire slew of messages you've just given in that whole conversation. So thank you so much. And this is what, go on.
Just that the conclusion really is that the answers are all within our blood and our cells and our cellular memory. It's really the conclusion of all of life, is that we're coming here doing these experiments on ourselves, learning about ourselves and what can really support us in that awakening process is just to realize that the answers are within our body. And that is so like, oh, the answers are within, just look within. Let me just go do that. But the overall conclusion is that the blood holds the memories, and the blood holds the codes, and the blood is within the body. And to be a woman and to have a bleed is the greatest, it's the greatest honor that we can have on planet Earth. Because blood, the menstrual blood, it holds that sacred coding. So on this planet, that is the most powerful substance we can connect to as women, along with the seed, and not one over the other, but that in that swinging pendulum of like the patriarchy, matriarchy, my conclusion there was also that, like, as the patriarchy is falling, are we planning on what's going to happen after it falls? Because are we going to just try to take over again? Because right now we're pretty pissed. And if we take over and we're coming from that pretty pissed off place, that's not going to go very well. So what we're being asked to do is to take that responsibility and apply that lesson to now. So if we're going to be girls run the world, girls run the world, girls. No, actually, we need to be in balance with the men, the feminine, the masculine and the feminine, which we're both, all of them, all at once. So to pull back the reins on the toxic masculine hatred, because the masculine is needing to come into embodiment. So if we can back up and trust our embodiment and our knowingness of ourselves, the masculine actually can rise. And these little, little adult boys that are just little boys, and they're, we're all so upset about these soft men out there that don't know how to be, blah, blah. And then the ones that are overly toxic, that are on the opposite end of the spectrum, it's like, they can all come into balance. And that reality is a byproduct of the toxic feminine. Why is toxic masculine a phrase, but toxic feminine isn't a phrase? Why isn't that a phrase, a hashtag? Why isn't that a thing? Well, it's a thing. And we're all byproducts of each other. This is co-creation. This is a thought-created reality. We're all co-creating the reality. So just my question that I want to leave is, what's the plan for when the patriarchy falls? And if it's not to come into unity with the masculine and for the feminine to be shoulder to shoulder, then what are we doing? Why are we here? And what are we fighting for if that's not the intention or the solution or the hope or the vision? What is the vision? Because it's not just to have a war. A war for what? What's it for if we don't know what vision we're holding? And that balance is obviously, that oasis point of restoring the ma'at and the truth and justice and equanimity to the planet. That planet Earth really, 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 really is an incredible place, seated from so many points in the vast infinity of existence. So restoring that balance.
Beautifully said. That's all I have to say. And it's so much of what I feel. I love to hear you articulate it, because I think that's also something that may be a challenge, is how do we articulate a feeling that we may have never seen? And if you're not reading about it, or if you're not being exposed to very different perspectives, how can you formulate it? So I'd love to bring this all together with what is a what, oh, how do I want to ask this? What is from both of you, your ultimate idea, energy right now to aid in this expression of invitation, of welcoming? What is that for you?
Well, I feel like there's a lot to say for that question. I think, and I feel like we're doing it now, even just sitting here, us three on the camera. I think one of the most important things for me at this time, and I completely agree with Paulina that we need to be moving towards unity with the masculine. I'm not in a partnership right now, so that's not my current focus at this moment in time. And so my current focus and my current belief is that sisterhood needs to be emphasized, and working with women, and part of toxic femininity, which is a definite thing that we're going to start using that phrase, is that jealousy, and that like seeing someone else have something that you want, and instead of being like, wow, that's amazing, let me support her and find out how she did it, be like, oh, that bitch. Like that mindset, which is so ingrained to us as women, if it comes from books or TV shows or movies or our day-to-day life, being in school or on the street, or so many different places that it shows up. It's just, that's my number one focus at this time. And so that's like coming to a place where I have real sisters that I can call if something's wrong, if something's good, just to send an I love you message, just to be like, hey, I really appreciate that you're in my life. Like having that kind of relationship with women at this time in my life is my biggest teacher and my biggest goal. So that's for me what's happening right now. And we've talked about it before, all of us, but we've all throughout our lives been the type of women that are like, I'm a tomboy, I get along with men, I don't get along with girls, I'm better with guys, I'm a guy's girl. Like I even tried learning how to play video games for a while. Why did I do that? Why? It's these things that we find ingrained into us that are just not it. And like being with women who support us and don't judge us and are willing to tell us when we're wrong in a loving and supporting way, and give us constructive criticism, and just show us love and ask us when we call, hey, do you just need to vent or do you want some input? Like those kinds of relationships, that's what I'm about right now, is really cultivating that sisterhood in a way that will ripple out to other people, but mostly for myself, because I do believe that as we anchor our own truth and our own love within ourselves into those around us, it will automatically ripple out. So for me, the number one thing at the moment is cultivating sisterhood and helping others learn how to do it within themselves also.
I love that. And I didn't even realize that mentioning this unity and balance with the masculine could be translated in the way of like, but I'm not in a partnership. And I'm so grateful for that perspective, because I was just, my whole body was nodding the whole time of like, no, that's what I'm doing too. But I was just saying about this union with the masculine. And so for you who are listening, that also is healing our relationship with our fathers and our grandfathers and their addictions to porn, and the little daddy's girl archetype, being a little virgin trophy, like all of these archetypes that stem from the masculine figures in our life. And, you know, our masculine figures in our life might be our mother, if she's the provider, the financial provider, the one who calls the shots, the one who makes decisions for the family, the one who's in charge. So this union with the masculine, thank you, Tal, for just kind of like smearing it and spreading it out so we could see it more clearly, is so multifaceted and multi-layered. And you can't do one without the other. We can't be healing our sisterhood unless we're healing our personal toxic masculinity. That's like, no, I'm a tomboy, I'm one of the guys, I'm too cool. The too cool complex.
Yeah.
So it's all so interrelated. And yeah, the sisterhood is the inherent tribal way as women, like to be women in a tent bleeding together, to be women giving birth together, to be women naked in the river together, for men to be fathers together, and for fathers to be leaders together, and for women to have their place, you know, the balanced place in all of it. So I love that. And it's so much of my journey too, and our journey together as friends, the three of us, it's so incredible. So I just want to make that very, very clear, that when I was talking about this unity with the masculine, the marriage of the masculine and feminine, this is within ourselves. This is between self to sister, self to brother, self to mother and father, self to grandparents, self to siblings, and self to the world in entirety. And certainly, to finish the circle, come back to that thing with self, the masculine and feminine with self. Because when our masculine is anchored, our feminine feels safe. When our feminine feels safe, the masculine feels expressive and the blah, 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 blah. So it's the infinity. It's the never-ending wave.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, 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 and yes. I want to bring this in with like my own personal story of, I mean, last year at Mana Yi. So it was the first time I felt like I had practiced having some very healthy relationships with women, and I felt very, very called to this. And it wasn't until last second that I was able to reach out to Paulina and go, hey, I really want to be there. Just want to let you know, would love it. And things fall into place as they do. The calling, the urges, these little excitements. When you feel like, I've learned the tingle, that's confirmation. That's the yes. That's what you follow. And that's the truth. That's the grounding point for me. It's the, yeah, you're right. Go to it or make it more. And to come into that circle and be held, like, I just, so many young limiting things that I thought had come up, and it was so beautiful. And also the tomboyery came up, and also this feeling of, I'm probably the most masculine person outside of the only man here. And I feel this way, but I'm not at the same time, but I really, like, my body kind of feels like it, but I'm not at the same time. And it was really quite interesting to witness this softening as I looked to other sisters who had feminine energy oozing out of their bodies, in their essence, in their clothing, in how they walked and talked. And I was just like, wow, I can be that too, because I see it. And if I see it, I can become it. And I think that's maybe something that, for me, I'm very kinesthetic. Like, I learn from touching, seeing, feeling, like trying. And so when I can like see it, but then like kind of put it on for size, it's like, all right, like, yeah, this is hyping me up a little bit. But coming into that sisterhood, it really felt for the first time that I was in complete flow with realizing and seeing everyone's different levels of masculine and feminine energy. And in the sense that we all showed up at a certain place, and throughout the week, we balanced. And, you know, as Paulina was saying earlier, like, she was terribly sick when it all started, yet she was the one leading the retreat. She's a very strong leader. And if you haven't followed her, go follow her and and like just witness the energies that you pick up on. So to come to this retreat, and she had to be very honest, like, yo, everyone, this is what's going on. Such a brave leadership thing to do. And I think that's literally the point you're driving with this feminine, like, hey, I need to call upon all of you to step up, because that is a part of this, coming up in your own leadership in the feminine energy, and not seeing it as a competition or overriding someone else, which I never felt that entire time. And it was the first time I felt truly safe to actually let the walls down over the days. And I honestly even fell asleep during one of our conversations after dinner. I was like, I want to be here so bad, but I'm so tired from all of this energy. I just need to sleep. And I felt safe enough to not leave and to just sleep on the little couch thing that was there. And that was ginormous, because when you're sleeping, you're your most vulnerable. Anyone can do anything. You can get dicks on your face. Like, that was something that came up for me when I was younger. It's like, man, people can really mess with you. You can't trust anybody. And so to trust that no one would be talking ill, no one would be laughing and pointing, like maybe like, oh, so cute, like whatever, but not making fun of. Like, such a weird experience I had growing up many times that made me feel even more restricted, separate, unique in the most unflattering way, of like, why am I so different? Why can't I connect? Why am I so weird? Why? And like, I really feel like when you ask yourself the why so many times, it's easier to just eliminate yourself from situations of communion, of collaboration, of co-creating. But that's the whole point of being human. That's the whole point of why we're here. You can't just extract yourself so deeply that you go into hermit mode, but you can't, I mean, it's not as healthy to just go all out, as in this very fierce, vicious, I'm going to eat you alive to get where I need to go along these other masculine figures, the toxic part. But if you could anchor yourself into the, I hear you, I see you, you're valid for everything you're feeling, and leave it at that, like, what does that leave someone with? And so I really want to share how impactful being able to go in and witness all the fluctuating energies, and how I adapted and released and really came to this fresh slate of, wow, I'm here and I get to remain in this as long as I can embody this and remember and reach out and call upon, which has been the medicine through and through. So thank you both for being there and for hosting it. That was it. Those are the kind of retreats or just gatherings that I think we need more of, because we worked with the blood, we worked with nature, we worked with herbs, we worked with the land and sound and the chakras and just so many things that get hushed and not brought to light.
Thank you for sharing that. And for those of you listening, the Mana Yi means Mother Earth in Greek, and it is the name of the convergence that we host once a year here in Crete, which is coming up this year in September 2023. Thalia and I will be your guides through the mystery, unless I'm horribly ill again and I get to fully surrender, as Isabelle said, and just be held, actually, and just totally fall off of any pedestal that might have existed. And something you reminded me of is how pedestaling is this, like how you were seeing the women and their beautiful feminine expression in their clothing and the way they walk and talk, is that when we pedestal someone, it's actually something really beautiful that we're doing, because it's actually the externalizing of a recognition we feel of ourselves. So we're seeing something in that person that we're so fucking jealous of, that we glorify them and we pedestal them, but it's actually a mirror of what we see within ourselves. Maybe we're not seeing it. That's the reason it's externalizing, pedestaling, and therefore unhealthy. But when we start to admire and really glorify and raise someone up, it's, for me, a beautiful realization to remember that they're just mirroring something of my own essence and composition back to me. And that's why I can recognize the power of what they're doing, or the power of their expression, or the power of what they're broadcasting, is because I align with it, I magnetize towards it, I resonate with it, because I am that. There's a part of me that aligns with it. So it's the magic of coming into sisterhood. And so I invite you, sisters, who resonate with any part of this conversation, thank you for joining us. And yeah, if you're feeling in alignment with these conversations, this 10-day 9-night gathering is convergence of spiritual allies and women from across the world to come together and work through these triggers. And like Isabelle said, working with the blood, the elements, the ancient mysteries, the ancient teachings, the ancestors of the land, the spirits of the land, to make this conversation a walking daily ritual, a walking daily standard of life. Because spirituality isn't something we get into or learn about. It's something we activate within ourselves that we're just really remembering. So it's a practice of awakening these ceremonial, ritualistic ways and these primal, tribal, ancient ways as a standard. It's raising it to become the priority of our reality and living in a state of regularity with those things. It's not something we retreat from our life to go to a retreat to do some cool stuff and then go back into our, real world and then try to integrate the magic of it and then hate the version of ourselves that was there because we wish we were still there, because our reality that we retreated from is so different than that. This is a convergence to come together and to raise the standard of our life to align with constant ceremony, constant ritual. It's not something you have to sit down and culturally appropriate while burning white sage to attain. It's something that we tune into our blood, our ancestry, and this is what we're working with, the ancestry. We're working with our mother's names, our mother's name, our father's names. to awaken the coding and the wisdom of our ancestry, of our soul heritage, our star heritage, and our human heritage. So if you're feeling the tingles and the excitement, we invite you to join us this September 2023 in Crete, Greece, the island that sits above Egypt, where the Nile River, as it merges into the Mediterranean waters, it circumnavigates this island, nourishing it with all the wisdom of Egypt, which is a strong ally point in the ancient Minoan mysteries. So this is the guidance and the support that we'll be working with in a really prominent way in our gathering. So,
and also with all of those things being said, it's important for me to just emphasize, and a lot of fun too, and a lot of laughter and fun, and there's a lot of deep work. 100%. 100%. There's a lot of deep work, and there's a lot of, crying and working through our triggers and
nude beaches.
But there's also nude beaches and laughter and joking and dancing and all the fun things, because especially when we're doing the deep work, just as a side note for anyone that's listening, and reminder to us, when we're doing the deep work, the shadow work, the getting to know our triggers, all of that like really tough stuff, you must balance it with the lighter side, with the laughter, with the dancing, with the gratitude. It must be balanced, or else you're just going to get into a loop of depression. Yes. That's all. And you can't just do the other side too, because then you'll just be living in la la land. We have to do both. So it's both of those things that we'll be doing. All of those things, everything, whatever you can think of will probably be there.
Yes. And I'm not sure if the same chef will be showing up. I pray. Oh, sweet Lord, y'all will have never eaten so well in your life. This is not a vegan menu to look forward to. I mean, it's very healthy, but it's nutritious. It's dense. It is divine. So, if you love good food, even if you just love good food, you want to see what it's all about, I could not recommend any higher.
Which doesn't mean it won't be catered to vegans if they would like to.
Yes.
It will be catered according to dietary needs and restrictions. I'm only recently coming out of veganism, so that's
yes.
Yeah.
Not to hate on the vegans, no offense, vegans. We love you. You got your place. I think we all have a journey with it. That's another topic for another time as well. And, to wrap it all up, I really want to say thank you so much, because I'm in deep reverence for each of us following whatever callings or curiosities or playfulness that has arisen within us over the years, and the hard, fucking brutal ass moments that have felt like a grip on our necks, barely allowing breath into the body, and then the sweet release of it all when we come to the other side. And we have that playful balance. We have the nourishing balance of life, and we have the up and downs. We realize it's not just a linear progress. It is up and down. And it's, as I feel, as if we have a forward projection to this, it is the most beneficial for where we are as an individual on the path, whatever that looks like for you. And to know that I have only been sped up by being exposed to both of you, Paulina and Tal, for your honesty and your genuine voice, your genuine feeling, your genuine message and belief, your fucking beliefs that they just align deeply into my body, and it's a full yes, and it allows me to say that I'm not crazy. And I think that's a really general, simple way to put it for a lot of people. But when you can feel like you're not crazy for how you believe, that's enough for you to be on this journey alone, and then to come into a community with others, and then go back alone and continue the process, but to laugh and have fun and be human, because we're all human, I mean, we're not just here to be ethereal. We're here to uncover, to play, to thrive, to learn, to love, to bond, to unite, just like you said. And so, yeah, just thank you, because I would not be in the spot I am without both of you being in the world where you're at. And I just love you both, and I'm so honored to have you on this conversation. This was much more than a podcast. This has been so much more, so much more. So I have so much love. Mm.
I love you so much too, Isabelle. It's so amazing to feel that familiar look in each other's eyes when we finally got to come in person together, to feel that instant magnetism before being in person. But when we really get to peel back the surface layer of being human, using letters drawn into words and messages and words, even just in virtual conversations, when we really get to access that little seed of like, wow, we were allies, and this feels very ancient, very familiar, very important, very serious, but also so sweetly, innocently pure and childlike. So it takes two to tango to find each other on planet Earth. So I couldn't be more grateful for these connections. Shall we close with our sacred vow of sisterhood?
Yes. How would y'all like to go through this order? Who wants to start? Or who wants to start?
Why don't you start, Isabelle, and then Dal, and then I'll go third.
Perfect. So everyone out there, this is a sacred vow of sisterhood. If you feel called to repeat this, to say it with us, to listen to it all the way through, and then repeat it back to yourself or speak it in your mind, whatever you feel called to do, but this is to really close this circle, close this conversation, and to bless whoever's on the other side. So I, who goes by the name of Isabelle, promises to be present and honest in this journey, as I know the transformation I wish for in my life comes through the devotion to my path.
I promise to receive with an open heart, to create space in my life for the transmissions, assignments, and integration. I will not speak of other sisters outside of this space, for I honor their journey and privacy.
I will listen without judgment and without absorbing any energetics of what is shared. I will hold space and honor my sisters in loving compassion without trying to change or fix her. I am ready for healing.
I am ready for spiritual remembrance and expansion. I surrender to the sacrifices that come with growth. I'm ready to shed and evolve for the benefit and fulfillment of all existence.
I now commit to myself, my path, my healing, and my joy to live in full alignment with my soul contract and my soul's intention of this incarnation.
I'm ready to be authentically embodied in the essence that makes me who I am. I am ready to rise in sisterhood and ultimate unity. So I'd love to just mention that this vow of sisterhood was created about 2 years ago for the first online course, Elemental Mysteries, that I had created. And so as you listen to it, some of the wording you can apply to the curriculum of this conversation we just had, where it says assignments, transmissions, and integration. So if you're walking alongside this vow, you can use this last hour of conversation as the curriculum that is kind of implied in this vow. And I'd like to clarify where it says without absorbing any energetics of what is shared. What that means is the energetics that don't serve and nourish the greatest good of our evolution, that we don't need to unconsciously inherit those energetics. It means to take what resonates and to take what's nourishing, supportive, empowering, and helpful, to integrate it properly and respectfully without claiming ownership of something that's not originally ours, and to integrate and find that process of maturity to not to duplicate, but to embody in authenticity.
Thank you. Aho. Much love, everybody. We will
Thank you for
catch
having us.
Yes, yes, yes. We'll catch you on the next podcast.